Let's continue the conversation now with Senator Peter Harder before joining the upper chamber. He spent 29 years in the federal public service and in that time served as personal representative for the Prime Minister at 3 meetings of what was at the time the G8. Senator Harder, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
So, we heard a bit of what has happened in Kananaskis from Andrew, and obviously a very busy 48 hours for the global leaders. But when you hear the Prime Minister speak and you look at the deals and the bilateral agreements that have been accomplished, was this a successful meeting for Canada?
I think it was a very successful meeting for Prime Minister Carney. You say it's 24 hours, but it really was in preparation for the last number of weeks. In fact, he made a number of visits to various countries to prepare for the summit. I say it was successful because, quite frankly, he was able to de-risk some of the tensions that could have disrupted the meetings in advance. His decision to go for statements rather than a communique, and that the agenda of the meeting was, by and large, the priorities that he established along with his counterparts, and they delivered. Having said that, I do think that this is a challenging time for the G7. I say that because I think that the early consensus amongst all G7 as to what the purpose of the G7 isn't as broadly shared as it once was. The United States under President Trump has withdrawn in terms of seeing the G7 as a priority event, and has undermined, I think, in some fashion, the historic focus of this being the liberal, democratic, economic powerhouse of the world coming together. His comments, for example, yesterday saying that too bad that Russia and China weren't there, would suggest that he didn't share the origins, at least, of the G7.
Well, and I think that's a very interesting example you pull up, because starkly we have here the Prime Minister making a very concerted effort to stand with Ukraine. They were hoping for a joint statement on Ukraine, as we said. It had to be stepped back because of the United States. And then, Donald Trump leaves Kananaskis before day one is really complete. After the group photo was taken, he heads back to the United States. Now, of course, there is obviously a conflict happening right now between Israel and Iran, but how much of this is indicative of not only his feelings for the G7, but any multilateral process? Because that doesn't seem to be a process which Donald Trump is particularly enamored with.
I think that President Trump has, both in his last presidency and in the last number of months in this, been much more of a unilateralist, and that has its effect on our bilateral relationships and our multilateral engagement, and we have to recognize that. No, the skill of Prime Minister Carney was to not have a disruptive event and to take consensus as far as he could on the issues that were relevant and that he could achieve a consensus on. And by the way, they will continue to make a statement on Ukraine that won't include the United States, but I'm sure that, in a sense, the bridge to the next G7 summit is secure, and that wasn't always thought possible.
Okay, the bridge to the next G7 summit secure, but I do wonder, and I've asked this of a number of guests I've been speaking to the last few days, as to the relevance of the G7. Is it still relevant? If the United States does not give it the respect that it essentially helped found in the beginning, is it still relevant in this day and age?
That's a very good question, and the G7 has had its ups and downs, the 8 back to 7, and the attention that it's achieved at various summits has been mixed. Having said that, it is still the high table of global multilateralism, and Canada is an appropriate and full-standing member of that. But there are other tables that have taken growing importance. The G20, by the way, Canada sought to have the G20 established, so it wasn't against Canada, but we did know that you had to have a series of relationships quite outside of the uniqueness of the G7 in terms of Western economic democracies to include broader representation from other countries. The second point I'd make on this is the G7 has always had an outreach strategy. The day two has always been a gathering of heads of government from various parts of the world.
Which
on
you
the
saw this year with India
Yeah.
as well as
there was
the
a
European
time when it was
Commission.
often Africa, when we were dealing with AIDS and pandemics and debt relief. Often Africa was involved. China was often there. India has been part of the outreach since 2018, I believe. So the outreach part has always been a feature of the G8, but it is a competitive landscape.
Okay. Well, I hate to say it, we never have enough time, but I do appreciate you coming by and sharing the expertise. Senator Harder, always good to see you. Thank you for this.
Thanks so much.